Over the years, fighting games have had a recent trend that I've noticed, and this trend being that stance characters are nowhere to be seen in most fighting games, or at least in most popular or mainstream fighting games. And in this video, I would like to discuss that. But first, what is a stance character? A stance character is a fighting game archetype that describes a character whose fighting style involves or revolves around switching between their normal stance and a given fighting stance, or a normal stance and several fighting stances. Although a stance character may still be able to fight in their normal stance, their core gameplay mechanic revolves around switching between stances to fight effectively. To get into their given fighting stance, a player simply has to punch in or press the command inputs or the buttons needed for them to get into a stance, and the animation in the video game will show that the character has switched between their regular stance and their fighting stance. As most of you know, fighting games are comprised of several different archetypes. I would like to draw similarities between two given archetypes, these two archetypes being a Shodo and a stance character. As most of you know, a Shodo is a character who's described as an all-rounder. Usually they have quarter circle forward, which is a projectile, the dragon punch, and as you know, a Shodo character being an all-rounder, you're wondering, how can a Shodo and a stance character have any similarities? But think about it, most stance characters are just like a Shodo character. They do have the tools to get around most things other characters do. They have the tools, it's just that to access the tools is difficult. A stance character can also have a dragon punch or something that acts as an anti-air, but it has to be accessed through the fighting stance. They may not have a projectile, but they may have a move that is spammable like a projectile, but that has to be accessed during a fighting stance or when they switch from one stance to another. So as you can see, a stance character does have the tools, they just have to switch from one stance to another. And sometimes the command inputs used during the fighting stance may be similar or may be exactly the same inputs that Shodo characters have. The quarter circle forward and the dragon punch inputs, those same inputs Shodo characters have, stance characters also have those inputs. They just need to get into their fighting stance for them to access them. You could say that a stance character is just an advanced version of a Shodo character. They have all the tools, they're just difficult to access because you have to switch between stances. Whilst the Shodo character doesn't have a stance, they just get to use the tools directly from their given original stance. A stance character is what a Shodo character will become over time if they continue to train. A stance character is just simply an advanced version of a Shodo character, in a way, I guess. Some stance characters from different fighting games include Squiggly from Skullgirls, Gen from Street Fighter, Jun and Meili from KOF. If you haven't seen my KOF video, check it out, I talk about them in that video, and Lee from Taken. Recently, I've been watching Street Fighter 6 gameplays and I noticed that I don't see a lot of Chun-Li plays, and I wondered, why isn't anyone playing Chun-Li? Or why aren't as many people playing Chun-Li? I mean, she's a fan favorite, a lot of people like her, she's played a lot in many different Street Fighter games, so why am I not seeing her as much in this game? Then I found out that Chun-Li is a stance character in this game, and I said, oh, that's why. It really says a lot when a character who's a fan favorite is not played that much simply because they're a stance character. So let's talk about it. What is it about stance characters that scares people? And why are stance characters being erased from fighting games? The reason why we don't see stance characters that much in fighting games nowadays is simply because stance characters are big brain characters. Seriously, stance characters are not easy to play. First, you need to learn the character's basic normals and command inputs. This is without the stance in their regular stance. Then you need to learn the normals of their fighting stance and their command inputs in that fighting stance, and if they have more than one fighting stance, you need to learn the normals and the inputs of the second fighting stance. This really makes it hard to play them because you need to learn a lot of moves. It's a long list of moves for you to learn just to play one character. What makes stance characters even more complex is that you need to learn how to fight by switching from one stance to another. You might be good at fighting in one stance, but you might be trash in another. This means that you don't really play the character as well as you could. Also, you need to know which stance is the best approach against another character. If you're given a character matchup chart, one stance may be good against one character but may not be as good against another, and you need to know all this with each and every character, what stance to use against who. This really complicates things, unlike when you're playing other fighting archetypes like Rushdown, let's say. All you have to do is play offensively. You know your offensive tools, just use them. Sure, you have to change your fighting style and how you're going to play the game depending against who you're playing with or who you're fighting against, but with stance characters this adds even more layers of complexity, because you not only have to think of the matchup, you have to think of which stance to use, how to switch from stance to stance, and all that. So stance characters are very complicated and probably one of the most complicated fighting game archetypes there is. On paper, stance characters should be goated. They should be the best character in a fighting game because they have a little bit of everything. But does having a longer command list mean that a stance character is better than other characters or stronger than other characters? I don't think so. Stance characters are also very hard to place on a tier list because, like I said, is having more moves mean that that character is better than another? Maybe, maybe not. Also, not many people play stance characters in fighting games, so they're heavily underrepresented. So it's hard to tell if they're good or not, or how well they do against other characters. But I would say for the most part, stance characters do pretty well in each game. I've never really seen a stance character that is low tier, since they have a move for so many different interactions and so many different situations. I would say most stance characters would be a good mid tier, or sometimes they're high tier, but like I said, no one ever really plays them, so it's hard to place. Are they good or are they not? Are they bad or are they trash? And that brings me to the next issue. The reason why most people don't play stance characters is simply because they're not fun to play. Rather, they're not designed very well. Most stance characters don't have moves that allow you to seamlessly transition from one stance to another in a way that is doable in a tournament or playing against someone else. The way stance characters switch from one move to another makes it difficult for them to play, so it's easy to drop combos, to make mistakes, and to fumble. A lot of stance characters are poorly designed, and that's why they're not fun to play. The mechanics that they have just don't work that well against other characters. For me, some well-designed stance characters include Squiggly from Skullgirls, because Squiggly has some moves that allow her, as the move is hitting, you can switch into stance. For example, she has her Sing super. As that super is hitting you, she has so much time to charge into a stance or to get into a stance. Also, because you can co-assist in the game, as the assist is hitting your opponent, you have time to get into a stance. And I feel like she's a well-designed character also because she has some decent combos that don't involve you getting into a stance or switching between stances. Yes, her most optimal combos might involve stance cancels, but for the most part I still feel like you can still get decent damage even without doing this. Another well-designed stance character would be Jun from King of Fighters, who never even appears in most KOF games. I don't know why. The reason why Jun is a well-designed character is because he has multiple ways of getting into a stance. One of the biggest issues with stance characters is that to get into a stance you only have one given command, but Jun has so many ways to get into a stance, which I like because it gives you a number of options on how to get into a given stance, which is great because different situations in a game may not allow you to do a specific command. Having so many commands to get into stances is great because one command might be easier than another, or one may be more difficult than another. So I'd say Jun and Squiggly are pretty well designed, although not that much, but it's decent, like they made it work. I think stance characters are very much needed in modern day fighting games because, as for me, I just don't like playing a game that has too many of the same archetypes. Like, if a game just has a lot of rush downs, I feel like the game feels stale, or if most of the characters are just shotos, it feels like something is missing. I feel like having more archetypes makes for a more developed game and just overall better gameplay because it gives players a lot of options. Also, there are some players who are able to play stance characters. Not everyone may be able to play the most common archetypes, Shoto, Rushdown, Grappler, Zoner that well. Some people would actually do better playing a stance character than other characters, even though I think most people cannot play stance characters that well, but I still feel like it's nice to have a game that caters to everyone or caters for everyone. I think what most stance characters need to make them playable is simply to have a transition move. A move that when it hits, maybe the move can be a normal, should allow you to transition from one stance to another. Maybe the move can cause stagger, which gives you more time to switch from one stance to another. I think simply giving stance characters transition moves, moves that when you hit give you enough time to switch from stance to stance, would actually make them playable again. But without this, it really feels like stance characters are just not worth it. Even if someone is able to put in the time to learn how to play stance characters, why would they want to spend so much time learning a character that is difficult to play or has a very high skill ceiling when you can just pick up another character who's easy to play and you get good results and you don't have to put in that much work? Like, make it make sense. So for me, I'd like to see stance characters to make a comeback. I do feel like they have a potential to have a comeback, and I would love to see them appear more in fighting games in general, but only time will tell. I hope stance characters can be better designed in the future so that most people can be able to pick them up. I don't want stance characters to always feel like they're for experts or for people who have been playing fighting games for a long time or playing a fighting game, a specific fighting game for a long time. I hope stance characters can be characters that most people can be able to pick up. I myself grew up playing stance characters. I was actually introduced to stance characters in Taken 3. I really liked playing Xiaoyu and Horang, who just happened to be stance characters. I thought that they were well designed and they were just fun. Although I don't think they were the hardest stance characters to play in that game. Probably Lee was the hardest, but I think you get the point. Stance characters can be fun and they add so much to the game, and it really sucks that they are nowhere to be seen nowadays. I hope this can change, and I hope stance characters can make a comeback and appear more in fighting games in general. Yeah, that's all from me. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. See ya!